textual work like this ourselves, and we really ought to be the foundation of everything we really are. We have so many good teachers today that it's easy to be lazy. There's some wonderful communicators, wonderfully insightful teachers. It's easy just to listen to a podcast and go, yeah, I got that. But if you don't do the work behind it, then at some point it falls apart both for you and for those that you minister to. Okay, Mark is a very fascinating book. The whole book is about who is this Jesus. That's the core question in Mark. And the way Mark does it is very, very strange. It's okay, so in the early part, flip to Mark. In the early part of Mark, you find that this Jesus is a powerful, miracle-working dude, you know. In fact, look at Mark chapter 6. Someone read verse 14 and 15.
Verse 6 what?
Verse 14 and 15, Mark 6.
King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. Others said he is Elijah, and so others claimed he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago.
He's doing some amazing things, and they're like, who are you? And so they think like, oh, maybe John the Baptist came back from the dead, or Elijah. Elijah was this great miracle-working prophet in the Old Testament, and so they're thinking that way. And then as the story goes on, you start seeing bits that Jesus says and does that makes him sound like Moses. So he's like a Moses who's come back. And then a little bit he does stuff that reminds you of Jeremiah. You think, wow, maybe something's going on there. Then as you head towards the end, you start getting a hint that this Jesus might be like a second David come back. You know, there's a sense of a David thing. But Jesus never says anything about himself directly until the very, very end. We flip to 14, chapter 14. This is way towards the end now. Verse 60 to 62. This is Jesus on trial here.
Say 60 through 62?
Yes.
Then the high priest stood up before the others and asked Jesus, well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself? Jesus made no reply. Then the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the blessed God? Jesus said, I am, and you will see me, the Son of Man, sitting at God's right hand in the place of power and coming back on the clouds of heaven.
Yeah, this is intense. This is the moment that all comes together. And the high priest asks him, sets him up with a question that to say yes is blasphemy. Right? This is it. Jesus says yes, and then he kicks it up a notch. I mean, like many notches, because he goes back to keep your finger there and flip to Daniel chapter 7. This is some serious stuff he's saying. Daniel 7, and let's read from verse 9 through 13. 9 through 14, really. This is a vision that Daniel has. So, you're reading some.
I like this one, so I'm going to read this.
Mark.
As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, nations, and men of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed.
this is a very intense vision, very intense story going on here. And Jesus is pulling all that into his response to the high priest who knows the stuff well. He's going back to this vision which is unreal that Israel doesn't know what to do with. So it's Judgment Day, right? The thrones are set up for judgment, the books are open, and the Ancient of Days, the great God of Israel, is seated on the throne to dispense judgment. And the beast is killed and its body destroyed. There's sulfur and brimstone floating around this little space there. And then suddenly there's this very strange thing. There's one like the Son of Man who comes to the Ancient of Days. And like a man, there's a man now coming to this great God who's sitting in judgment. And then he takes his seat. He's with this God in judgment, and to this man is given all dominion. This is a bit that for Israel, no one knows what to do with that. But what are you talking about? What man could possibly sit down with Yahweh? How could that possibly be? And he gets all everlasting dominion, and he's the one that everyone bows down to. And Jesus says, yep, I'm that one. So instantly the response the high priest has is verse 63 of Mark 14. He says, and the high priest tore his garments and said, what further witnesses do we need? You have heard the blasphemy. What is your decision? And they all condemned him as deserving death, because no one gets to say that. Okay, that's what's going on here. But if Jesus is that person, if he is that mysterious person, Mark is saying, well, then he gets to be the one who reinterprets Torah, because he's done that before. You heard it said, I'll say to you, Son of Man, the Sabbath was made for us. We can change. He was changing Torah as he went through. Well, he gets to do that because he's this one who sits with the Ancient of Days. He's not just a prophet. The transfiguration makes sense. Who's this man who goes up the mountain and starts glowing? Well, because it's a prefiguring of the glory that is to come. So suddenly it all starts clicking. And Jesus is not just a prophet. He's not just Moses or Jeremiah. He's not just a king. He's not just David either. He's something more, something far more. What is that something more? We don't know. Mark leaves us hanging there. It's not clear. Because the problem is that this Ancient of Days is Yahweh. Look at Exodus chapter 20. Exodus 20. I'll read, and God spoke, 10 Commandments. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Flip to Deuteronomy 6, verse 6 and 7. Oh, really? Verse 4 is where I really want to be. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So now you have this very clear sense of this Old Testament Yahweh God who is one and will have no other gods before him, will not share his glory with anybody else. But then now there's this man saying that, yeah, I'm going to share his throne and I'm going to sit in judgment over the entire world. So then when you hit that bit, then again, think of it as encountering Mark for the first time. We read it with all the layers of stuff that we've accumulated. But if you're reading for the first time, you read about Jesus, you don't quite know who he is. You get these hints, and you get all the way to the end, and you hear him say this astounding thing. Then you might want to go back and read the whole book again and say, wait, who was that? You know how that is sometimes? You read a book, you get to, and then I've got to go back and reread it in the light of what I knew. And if you do that, you'll find some examples that blow your mind. So let's start with Mark chapter 1.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Maybe make a statement would be better. I think it would have been, I would have hated to have been in that time period where Jesus was making these claims.
Yeah.
Because to believe him, you just read, you will have no other God before me, and to me, in that space, to said, yes, I believe Jesus, would have been doing exactly what you've been taught from day one.
I
How to
hear
do.
you.
It's easier
Right.
after he's crucified and risen, then you've got some proof. But
Right.
I always read that, and I feel sorry for the high priest in some way.
I hear you. I'm with you.
Because, wow.
So the disciples don't seem that stupid anymore. You know, I mean, this is crazy stuff, man. And you're like, wow, wait, what's going on? And you can see why they're filled with fear half the time. They don't know what's going on. Suddenly this guy is saying things that, it's like he had this wonderful friend, and now suddenly Mike Smith, whom we all love, claims to be Jesus. And we're all looking at him going, wait, what? He still seem awfully sweet and kind and wonderful and all, and yet, maybe you need medication, you know? Mike, you need medication.
I already have that.
Okay.
Not only that, but now he's undercutting the whole foundation of everything that
Yes.
you believe.
That's right.
You have to throw your life away to
You
follow
have to
him.
throw your life away to follow him. Right, exactly. That's the gospel.
Paul Mayer, a historian from Michigan, Western Michigan, biblical historian.
So
takes-
that should give us
Right,
more.
right.
Yeah, so take that for what it's worth.
Western Michigan. He
Believe
was
him
actually a
more.
prof at Western when I was there. He wrote. He takes, you know, some of this context, but one of the books he wrote was about they find Jesus' body, and they can prove that it's Jesus, that he didn't, and the effect that had on the church when it would change everything about what they believed. Because if you have no physical resurrection, then it's gonna, and the process that people go through when the foundation is undercut and people are making these claims, yeah, who do you,
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
it's
really.
exactly what happened to them.
Yeah.
There's the whole foundation of one God,
Got blown up.
and this is what I have to do to follow that God,
Right.
and our whole civilization is built on that, plus our whole history.
Yeah. It's crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff.
It's crazy stuff. We are very fortunate in some ways, and at the same time, we are quite unfortunate because we don't have to face those huge questions. It'd be good for us to face that question today, because this Jesus is so mind-numbingly different. You can't just walk off and continue with life as usual.
Well, we really are facing that question.
We
just
really
don't
are.
allow ourselves to.
Yeah, if we allow ourselves to, that's the real issue. If he is what, yeah, Jesus Christ Superstar has that line, right? Are you really who they say you are?
Mm.
And if you are, then wow. And so,
Yeah, the conclusion that I draw when I ponder the question is, I'm not a believer.
yeah, wow, yeah, I hear you.
You know,
I hear you. Yeah,
right? If
because
I-
that intensity that he's talking about, right?
Well, yeah, and I think of the
Yeah.
things that I hang on to, the fears that I have,
Mm.
you know, that I can't fight off, the stuff that I grip onto. I think, just like Isaiah says, if I fear the Lord,
Mm.
I wouldn't fear these things. But I fear these things,
Mm.
and I think,
I hear you.
Good thing
Every now-
salvation is by grace.
right. That's what Tammy says whenever I tell her. I said, I hope it's great in heaven, honey, because I'm not going to be there with you. She says, it's Jesus, quit saying. That's why every now and then I'll run into somebody and I'll also say to me, see, now that's a real Christian.
Yeah.
See, there's a real Christian, someone that's laying it all down.
Mm.
Faith is a spiritual gifting. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
So,
just
I mean, the
not just
beautiful
a
thing about this
discipline,
conversation is
Yeah.
I think you're all getting a sense of the outrageous nature of what is being said. It's just crazy in the context of, it is similar to the guy in Korea who was at Moon,
Mhm.
who said he is now Jesus
Yeah.
come back. That sounds stupid to us, but that's the same kind of thing that's going on here.
Mm.
Okay, so you go back to Mark, and suddenly you find that all the way through Mark are hints, and they're blatant, not just hints, pointing to who this Jesus is. So Mark chapter 1, verse 1, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Oh. There you go. Oh, okay, so he actually said that right at the start. As is written in Isaiah the prophet, behold, I send my messenger before your face who will prepare your way. Son of God, Israel is the Son of God. You know, Israel is called the Son. So it's not that, it's not like divinity, just because it says Son of God doesn't mean divine or anything. But then he says, I send my messenger before your face who will prepare your way, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make his path straight. So John came to prepare the way for who? The Lord. Yahweh. And then Jesus is that one. So suddenly there's a putting together of Jesus and God. And then there's Mark chapter 2 verse there's the paralytic that they dig a hole through the roof and lower him down, right? You know that story? And Jesus forgives his sins. And then verse 7, Mark 2:7, the scribes are saying, why does this man speak like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Another hint there. Can you flip to Mark chapter 4, verse 35? This is a good one. Someone read from 35 to 41.
And on that day, when evening had come, he was saying to them, let's go over to the other side. And leaving the multitude, they took him along with them, just as he was in the boat. Other boats were with him. There arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up with water, and he himself was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they awoke him and said, Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing? Being aroused, he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. He said to them, Why are you so timid? How is it that you have no faith? They became very much afraid, and they said to one another, Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?
What are they feeling? What is going on right there?
It's certainly a mix of things, but you think about like right before a tornado or a really violent storm, and the sky gets all green, and you're like, and then it gets really still. It's really freaky.
Spooky, yeah.
So that happens in nature, but it's because that guy said so.
That
I'd be
is
flipping out, I'd be
crazy.
jumping out of the boat.
Yep. Yep. That's well put, yeah.
I think they're scared, but then they're also excited about being part of something, so crazy.
They were really confused.
Confused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, here was this man they thought was probably more of a political savior than anything. So now all of a sudden this guy is telling the wind and the waves to calm down.
Right.
And I'm like, oh,
Right.
what is going on here?
Right.
The story is so matter of fact.
It's so matter of fact,
I know.
yeah.
It's
That's
really,
right.
it's really like Mark, right? Mark
Right,
is
right.
this guy. He
Yep.
just says, "This what happened."
What happened?
There's nothing in the narrative
Yeah.
that makes it seem
No
like
extreme language or anything.
he didn't exert himself. He didn't strike the rock with his staff. He just said, "Bah."
Enough of that, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
something that always bothers me in these stories is when Jesus kind of rebukes the people. And I feel like he should,
Be kind.
yes, I
Yeah,
mean, he
what's
should
up with that?
understand. I mean, he's like, yeah, it's almost like he's like, why are you afraid? Do you still not have any faith? And it's like, hey,
He just
you're
shut down a storm!
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
But it's still like, there's other places.
I hear you, I do.
I want him to always love me and
Uh-huh.
just say, understand where I'm coming from. I mean, he knew how hard of a leap this was for them.
So why did he
Yeah,
do
the
that?
rest
So,
is
yeah,
fine.
no, go further. Why would he then rebuke them?
That's what I don't know. I mean, he wants them
Yeah,
desperately. I mean, this whole, he knows what he's going to go through.
right. For them.
Eventually, they don't
Right.
yet understand it, and I guess maybe like you do with your kids, you just want them to get it because you know it's going to be hard until they. I
So
don't know.
has he lost his patience with them? Is that what's going on?
It kind of sounds that
Kinda
way, but
sounds
he's
that
not
way, right?
supposed.
Is he
He didn't
frustrated
sin though,
with
right?
them?
So if he didn't sin, then he can't have lost his.
Huh.
I get kind of
So
confused
what's
about his
going on?
response sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's going on?
I think the interesting part to me is their question to him is really questioning his
Ah.
care for them.
Do you not
It's-
care?
Yeah.
Huh.
He didn't actually rebuke them.
Reap the wind.
Like,
Yeah.
he asked them questions.
He asked.
So let's try it. What tone of voice do you think he would have said it with? Try out a couple of different ways.
just woke up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly.
whoa. It's not you, Cindy.
I'm just saying. That's what comes to my head.
He's not from Western Michigan. Yeah, no, what
So he
tone of
must have
voice do you
pounded after
imagine?
that.
So
When he
Western,
says-
there was no coffee.
To me, I get, obviously when I read it, there's a lot of times in there where when I read some of his responses to them or questions them, I hear some annoyance, impatience. That's what I hear a lot of time.
I
Sometimes.
understand that.
My dad rebuked me one time.
One time.
Yeah, he was
Okay.
not a confrontational person,
Oh.
so the one time
What did he say?
stands out, like, to this day.
Apparently.
Yeah. I was a freshman in college, so I had just recently learned that I knew everything.
Right.
And he was in the den, and I was talking to my mom in the living room, and my mom was struggling with something, and I was telling my dad what he should be doing better with regard to my mom.
Oh, good.
I'm having trouble even getting through the story.
Yeah.
So he walks out and he says, "Hey, Mike, once you've lived 50 years and you've been curled up in the fetal position on the floor because you don't know how you're going to provide for your family tomorrow, then you come and tell me how I should have lived my life."
Wow. That kind of transparency.
Yeah,
that's
there was no
mind-blowing.
anger in one sense, there was no volume, and to this day I am rebuked by that statement.
Yeah.
Well, you're getting close to 50.
Yeah, yeah. And I still only know about as much as I did when I was a freshman in college. I don't know what happened differently, but
Still saying the same thing.
So when I read, he got up and rebuked the wind, I always look at that and think, what did that? And like the depth of the word rebuked, I don't know exactly what it
Yeah,
means,
it's
but
very
we
powerful.
think of it like,
Yeah.
I punched you verbally in the nose, and the rebuke to me always sounds more like, reads like his presence pushed something like back or out. Like he rebuked the wind. What? The wind can't even obey. He sucked something out of the. Sucked the energy out. Pushed aside. So to be rebuked is to have something touched very deeply within you. So when I think about Jesus, I think he had no choice. His very presence either rebuked you or, it's almost like when Jesus walked in, there is something rebuked and invited at the same time.
The Israelites, ancient Jews, whole Old Testament has a sense that evil is contained in the waters. So evil lives in the water. And this evil that lives in the water creates these choppy waves and calls into these winds that threaten to kill the people in the boat. So this evil is speaking against and saying to them, your word is very good. It's rebuking that evil. And kind of saying, don't you trust me? I've got you. There is comfort in what you're saying. So that's sort of what's going on. We're safe. You're safe with me. I wish you would believe. I wish you'd trust me. I want you to trust me because if you did, then the fear won't be there. You'll be free to then give yourself to others. When you have fear, then you're so focused on survival, you can't really be working on it. So a lot of times he's rebuking our fear because it keeps us from actually following it. So do not fear.
Right, and it's not like they wouldn't have known how to handle themselves in a squall because
Sure.
they did this
Listen.
for a living.
Right.
So for them to be to that point,
Yeah.
all of their
Right.
all reliance on their self was gone.
Gone.
And
Beautiful.
they weren't ignorant men in this situation.
Right.
Even that Mark 4:40 is another callback from Isaiah, really,
Yeah.
or at least Isaiah.
Sure.
I can't think
Read
of
it.
50 somewhere, but I can't find it. Where he does talk about, Isaiah says essentially, when you fear man, you're not fearing God.
It's very simple, you're right.
Karen, are
And
we
he says,
answering
why
your
he
question?
compares and contrasts fear and faith.
I'm not sure if there is
Are
an
we
answer.
are we answering your question about the tone of?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a question, more so just a statement that I have to kind of work through. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely seeing it from a lot of different
Yeah.
angles and what it could imply.
Well,
my,
even if you
my wife has said to me that sometimes I'll say this to her or to the kids. Why did you do that? And what they hear is, how stupid are you? And maybe I intend that. That's the horror of my own brokenness. It can sound nice, like, give me a reason that he did that, but really, so sometimes when I read a sentence like that, I can project my brokenness onto him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not. He is more, there's a beauty to his invitation. Why do you fear? You know.
there's plenty of confrontation, even if this is a gentle statement here.
There is confrontation, yeah.
There's lots.
He rebuked them for the hardness of heart. That's a direct quote. So he just got there, yeah. Here's another one. Mark chapter 6, verse 30. We don't have to read that because we're heading into need to wind up. But that's the story of the 5,000. He feeds them. They're hungry and they're tired. He sits them down on the green grass. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He feeds me beside still waters. He restores my soul. This is very familiar to them as to us. And he does exactly that. He has them sit down in the green grass. They're tired and he feeds them. And so suddenly in that story, what they're hearing is Psalm 23. What's happening, what Mark is talking about is Psalm 23. This is the good shepherd of Israel. Who is this man who can do these things? Here's one that I think I want us to look at. Mark 6 verse 45. Let someone read 45 through 52. This I want to go into a little bit. This is right after Psalm 23 has happened, so to speak. Right after he is cared for them.
Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. But about the fourth watch of the night, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them.
Okay, we gotta come to that bit. That's very
Kind of
weird,
weird,
isn't it?
does, but
Yeah.
You're going the wrong way.
He's acting real cool, like,
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll notice that I'm
Hey, guys.
walking on the water and see if they
What you
say
doing?
anything.
He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened.
Okay. So a couple different questions here. One is, who is this man who walks on the water? Just what is that? Well, go back to Job chapter 9. That's right before the Psalms. It's a weird book to find. Job chapter 9 verse, I don't know. Just read 5 to 8.
moves mountains without their knowing it and overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth from its place and makes its pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun and he does not shine. He seals off the lights of the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea.
So that's the one who walks in the water. It's the Lord God. So that's the prefiguring going on. That's what he's pulling out of. So the one who walks on the water is... Whoa, that's a little spooky. Behold, I stand at the window and knock.
Do you ever wonder why he did, like, in that...
It's a bird.
He could have just
Right here.
appeared on the boat,
Uh-huh.
or he could have just appeared on the other side.
Uh-huh.
Why stroll on the water
Stroll
in
on
the
the
middle
water.
of the night?
Well, Mark is telling the story as in saying Jesus is prefiguring Yahweh. Jesus is doing all the things that only Yahweh could have done. So that's the way he's telling us. He's leading us into who is this Jesus? That's the constant question. So then he walks in the water, and then you have to ask the question, who is this that walks in the water?
And then
Well,
pushes you back.
you flip back and say only one walks in the water. But then you come to that bit, and he intended to pass by them. And it's a peculiar little phrase, like, did he not care? Did he not want to help? In fact, when Matthew tells the story, he is, I think, doesn't know what to do with it, so he leaves that bit out completely. Jesus in Matthew doesn't pass them by or anything. He doesn't know what to do with it. But there's a clue, we went back to Job 9, right, to see the one who walks in the water. If you keep reading on in Job 9, we'll read verse 10 and then verse 11.
He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. When he passes me, I cannot see him. When he goes by, I cannot perceive him.
And the phrase in the Septuagint for passes me by is the exact same phrase in Greek for and he intended to pass them by. So he's evoking that same section. This is Job 9 the whole way from Mark in that story. And what he's saying is, and in that bit in Job, what Job is saying is, he passes me by, I don't even see him. It's like, I don't even have the capacity to see him fully for who he is. He passes me by and I do not perceive him. And so Mark is saying, this Jesus is here and he's right by us, and we don't see him for who he is fully. That's the sense that Mark is evoking, does it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what's going on. It's not that he doesn't care or anything like that. In fact, there's another resonance in this. It's a beautiful section that passes me by. It's there in Job, right? But there's an even older bit where God passes someone by. Can you recall? Let's say
On the mountain.
What happens?
He says for him to hide, and he'll pass him by.
That's right, exactly right. Moses says to God, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me find favor in your eyes. It's a very peculiar little prayer. And God said, okay, what do you want? He said, show me your glory. I want to see your glory. And God said, you can't see my glory because you'd die if you saw my glory. I tell you what, you go and I'll stick you in this corner of the mountain, and then you cannot turn your face away from me. You don't want to see me because you'll die. I'll pass by you.
Mm.
And then he does. He puts him in the corner, and then the glory of God passes by. So all these resonances are there in this little phrase, and he intended to pass them by. One resonance, I am among you, and you don't see me fully for who you are. And the second resonance, and the one that I am is that one, the one God, glorious God of Israel. So all that's in that little bit. So Mark's pointing us to Jesus using very hidden and elusive ways. He's pointing, hinting, but not saying, till that very last bit where Jesus says that. I want to read you a quote from Rowan Williams. We heard of Rowan Williams? He is a former Archbishop of Canterbury. Just a wonderful guy, really godly, brilliant man. I'll read this bit. Throughout Mark's Gospel, Jesus holds back from revealing who he is, because, it seems, he cannot believe that there are words that will tell the truth about him in the mouths of others. I'll read it again. He cannot believe that there are words that will tell the truth about him in the mouths of others. What will be said of him is bound to be untrue, that he is master of all circumstances, that he can heal where he wills, that he is the expected triumphant deliverer, the anointed. There is a kind of truth which, when it is said, becomes untrue. Remember, the world Mark depicts is not a reasonable one. It is full of demons and suffering and abused power. How, in such a world, could there be a language in which it could truly be said who Jesus is? I want to contextualize that for us. It's like you and me saying, yeah, Jesus is God. Right? You say it, right, and then you move on. But you haven't really entered into what he just said. And by saying it, you eviscerate it of the totality of what's going on. But then when you start diving into the depths of what is going on, you get to the place where, like Mike, you might say, wow, I don't know if I'm a believer. If I believe the stuff that I say so glibly, how then should I live? That's Mark's fundamental question. He's hiding and hinting and alluding because he doesn't want you to quickly get to the place of saying, yes, this is the Messiah, the Son of God. Because if you get there and you say it and then you don't live it, wow, what happens then? So that's the now Mark, two closing thoughts. Mark, having established this unity or this oneness of this Jesus with the God of Israel, also throws in a few things that separate them. For instance, in the Garden of Gethsemane, it says, if it is possible, he's praying to his Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Suddenly there are two figures, there's Jesus and then there's his Father. Or on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? So there's this. So Mark sets it up in such a way that this Jesus is the Ancient of Days, and yet is separate from him. And there's a tension that he doesn't resolve, he just leaves it there. And then the early church, the church spent the 4th and 5th centuries debating that issue. Who is Jesus with respect to God, right? All those controversies that went on. But Mark leaves it there and moves on. I think the core question that he's asking you, me, and I hope you won't walk away from this and let this pass you by, is who is this Jesus and what are you doing about it? What is the fullness of his revelation? And C.S. Lewis once wrote that the danger of doing theology is that for him, his imagination far exceeded his obedience. I think that's true for us in this game. I fear that from my heart constantly. I can toss out the stuff so glibly and then walk on and act as if, so it's never touched my heart. It just kind of went like that. And so I'll leave it there. Thoughts, reflections?
I have a question. If we hope to do, working with the scripture like that intensely, are there good resources that you would recommend?
If you're interested, let me know. I'll give you a list.
Yeah.
It'll take work.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to give you